Jack and I are out on the breezy side of the Great Salt Lake. That's it right over there. You can't see it because the exposure there is kind of blown out to make exposure for my face here. If I touch the screen though, you can see that it will go through and then pull the proper exposure for that. And what you see in the background there is Antelope Island, where we cut an episode a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, I'm here for trying to get the exposure back on my face there. Well, that's a happy medium right there. Okay, we'll live with that. I'm here for a couple of reasons. One, I've been chronicling the decline of the Great Salt Lake for about the past 5-6 years now. And over the years, seeing it decline and then seeing it come back last year, and then now it's in another decline, which seems to be one of the worst ones yet, has me a little bit disconcerted. So, but I come here though today to talk to you about photography. I get a number of responses on the pictures that I post on different Facebook groups and on my blog and so on. And I wanted to just kind of give you some trip pics, tips, and tricks, if I could, to help you tell your stories. While art is inherent to the artist, I do think that we are all capable of understanding certain design and compositional principles that can help us express our stories a little bit better, help us feel better about the art that we might be creating, and create something that we can feel really good about sharing with other people. So I'm borrowing from two different camps of thought when it comes to this idea of putting things on a canvas or putting things on a screen as we're doing here. One is deals obviously with photographic composition, and the other one actually gets into the concept of design, some terms of design. I'm going to borrow from both of those, and I'm going to put a link up here so you can maybe go into a little bit more depth there if you want to. So this one will be on compositional influences, and then the next one that'll come up will get into kind of the grammar of design. So if you want to go a little deeper, you can click on those cards that pop up here on the screen. So what I want to start off with here are compositional tips. We have ways of looking at things. I'm sure you might have heard of the golden mean or the rule of thirds or design concepts like that, just the way the human eye goes through a frame and looks at art or looks at a photograph. And so I want to go through and disclose a few of those. And like I said, those are based on compositional influences, but there are also some design influences there as well. The first one being this idea of the rule of thirds. Now, you might have noticed a tic-tac-toe grid that shows up on your own screen on your iPhone or your Android phone that kind of suggests to you ways to go through it and place certain objects. But a lot of people kind of go through and think that they place their points of focus or interest somewhere within one of those three different areas. And the inverse of that is actually more true. The place to put them are where those different lines go through and intersect. And I'm circling the ones here that are on my screen, hopefully to kind of give you reference. But I want to show you here what it is that I'm talking about. Now, I photographed the vanadium on our last tour through Moab. We went down Schaefer Trail, and I stopped and composed a few photographs there. And I used the rule of thirds in doing so. And you can see where the car shows up on the lower right intersection of those lines. And then if you look at the top horizontal line, you'll see that kind of coincides with any kind of a horizon line that might be out on the horizon, as the case might be. And what it does is it introduces some space into the photograph, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. A place where the car can go. The car has a natural vector going on with that, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. But it just kind of gives the eye a reason to move through the frame. And speaking of moving frames, Jack is moving mine here because he's still a little discombobulated. Hopefully he'll settle down here a bit. And that's it. It doesn't take a whole lot to start practicing that, and especially if you bring up the rule of thirds on your particular grid here. So the next image is of the vanadium. It's facing the opposite direction. I have it merging into another a line that's coming into that. And that line that you see in the background is the actual trail of Schaefer Canyon. And that's what we're going to go down. And so the energy or the focus, the way the element is placed there on that bisection and the way it's faced toward that trail, hopefully is an indication that, well, that's where we're going to go. Okay, that becomes part of the story. In my vehicle photography that I've done over the years, this is kind of a hard, fast rule that I obey, because more often than not, I'm dealing with a really solid horizon line. And then I obviously have the vehicle, the foreground image, to place into the frame. Lots of rules are made to be broken. And when I'm teaching photography, I try to get my students to adhere to the rule of thirds. And then their next assignment is to go through and see how they can manipulate it. How do they make it work to their advantage without being exactly balanced or asymmetrical, as the case might be, or equidistal? There's a word for you. It doesn't have to be. In fact, your subject's going to go through and dictate where you're going to eventually make those intersecting lines land within your composition. As long as it makes sense to you as a photographer, as long as it gives you some sense of, oh, wow, that's really cool. That's all you really need there. In landscape photography, this method of compositional strategy comes in, I think, more importantly there, because typically we are dealing with strong horizons. But if we put that horizon right straight through the middle of the frame, the energy in the image itself becomes dormant, it becomes stagnant, and it just does not really give the eye a reason to go through the frame, unless, of course, you're Wes Anderson, where everything ends up in the middle of the frame. But you know what? He's a pro at that, and he can go through and break all the rules he wants, because the public really like what's going on there. Again, I'm coming back to, what does the eye do? You know, there are three drivers I have for the reason why I'm on the road and why I take pictures. The first one is to create peak experiences. The second one is to create solid connections. And the third one with my cancer is to have worthwhile pain. I won't go into the last two. The first one, though, is pretty important to me, because those peak experiences are what I end up taking a picture of. Okay, I photograph that because I want that peak experience to become a memory for me and for it to last for a long time. So I'm applying the rule of thirds to make it appear the way my mind's eye might remember it as well. Along the coast of Oregon, and there are these blowholes here. Well, I placed that blowhole on the upper left-hand intersection of the lines, and then went through and composed the rest around that and came up with that image. So it's not only the horizontal lines that we need to be concerned with in landscape photography, the vertical lines also come in too. Here I have an image taken in the redwood forests of Northern California, and of course the vertical redwoods are located on the right-hand vertical side of the rule of thirds. Now, I can do this in absence of a vertical pillar of some sort. I've done this with this image that I shot out at, it's in the El Dorado forest. But here we have this very somber, almost macabre scene. It was during a forest fire in the area, and it was at this lake where the water had come down to dramatically low levels that revealed all of the trees that had been mowed down in order for this lake to come into play and become a recreation area. So when, you know, hit the hulls of any boats or anything that way. Well, in its disclosure, if you will, was this huge stump. And so there's this implication of a vertical vector going up that I placed down on the lower right-hand side of the frame to go through and maybe imply that something was there. Sometimes the frame is so crowded, you have so much to put in there that we don't quite know where to go through and compose and do that. So really it's just kind of up to you. I look to see, well, what is probably the most dynamic or interesting part of the image that I want to capture, and I'll place it somewhere on those cross members. Now, this shot of the Virgin River going through the southern part of Zion Canyon, probably one of the most photographed parts of the canyon there. And if you catch it at the right time with the right light, yeah, it looks pretty good. And you'd be hard pressed to go through and go wrong with any image taken from that vantage point from the bridge. Which now, however, they've made it illegal to take photographs from the bridge, so you can no longer take this exact image. But what I've done here is I've taken that point of interest and put it right into the river, and the Virgin River as it starts to flow then out towards that golden peak that you see in the background. And it works for me. It might not work for you. It's not your peak experience, it's mine. This one of Yosemite Valley, was so much that I wanted to put it into the frame, but to keep that waterfall in there and yet the clouds and what was happening, I wanted something to hit the frame on the left side too, as far as that the mountainside coming down into that I just moved it over a little bit and played with it and went through and did the shot. Landscape photography gives you that kind of freedom. The next concept I want to get into is this idea of negative space. I like lots of air, lots of room. I mean, look what I've done here. Look at all this negative space that's here. Its purpose is to go through and maybe isolate your subject within the frame, to allow the eye to go through and discover what's going on there. It's a great place to create a spot for text to appear. So if you happen to be including some graphics in your images that you're going to use, negative space comes to your advantage there. This image taken of it's a nice summer retreat out in the San Juan Islands, and at the time we were out there, it happened to not be summer, and so everything was kind of put away for the wintertime. And with the clouds and the rain and things going on, it became very muted, for the exception of these yellow highlights that were happening. But it just made for what's called a vector. It made for a line. And what a vector does is it takes your eye and draws you through the image, okay? And there are a number of different types of vectors out there. There are two that I look into, what's called an index vector and something called a motion vector. Here we have an index vector because the dock itself is pointing to the dock house at the end of it, but it's also bringing the eye through the frame itself. This next one is what I would call a motion vector. And while this is a still image, nothing's really moving, we know, okay, by experience, by living, by being out there, that this ferry is coming into port. We know that this is the bow side of the ferry because we see the vehicles also pointing, giving us a motion vector too. So we know there's some kind of movement that's happening with that, right? And with that, again, it pulls the eye and brings it through. Pathways and roads make wonderful vectors, and especially if we're traveling. The road is our guide, it's our canvas, it's where we're going. If we're hiking, the trail is doing the same thing. So this the sandy trail here in Snow Canyon in southern Utah, again, takes your eye and pulls it out into the kind of the geological wonder that is Snow Canyon. Or the Colorado River here that has dug this incredible trench. And of course, the Forrest Gump Road. I think anybody who's ever traveled this road has taken this photograph, and for good reason, because it's quite spectacular. As you look at the photograph, it takes you down into what eventually becomes Valley of the Gods, and then into Monument Valley. This is one of my favorite images, though. This is taken alongside in the Columbia River Gorge, alongside the Columbia River, because I love the road, and where it takes me, this is kind of an homage to that. And this isn't a straight vector. This has some nice curvilinear lines to it, and it makes you wonder what's around that bend, right? What's on the other side? That's what travel is all about. This slug was in one of my favorite places in Washington, and making its way, and it's making its way over a very saturated piece of bark that also had some moss on it. But the texture play that was happening here between these two started to tell a story to me. This is the Heceta Headlands, and there's a lighthouse out there, and it's got this beautiful beach with these stones there. And I happened to be there at a time when it was raining, and I loved to see the texture that it was doing. So here, texture is kind of doing the same thing as a line would be. In fact, there is a line there that's created by the texture, and what it does is it draws your eye through the frame. Okay, gives your eye some movement into the story of the image. The texture of the mountain where this old train tunnel is coming through lends itself to the ruggedness of the actual adventure itself. So texture helps you tell a story. Your iPhone actually has 3 different or if not 4 different focal lengths. One is a super wide, then there's a standard like what I'm shooting with here, and then there is a kind of a 2 times, kind of a semi-telephoto, and then the 3 times, which gets into a little bit more of a telephoto. Now they're not extreme in terms of focal length, but they are enough for you to start varying how you are looking at something. Here is a shot of my tiger, and this is out kind of not far from where I am here, out of Black Rock, on the other side of the Salt Lake Marina. And going out there, there are these wonderful cement blocks and all graffitied, and then way off in the background is Antelope Island. And so I rode my bike out there, set it up, and framed up the shot. And I shot this with a wide angle because I just really liked the airiness of what was going on. And then I wasn't using my iPhone with this, okay? I was using a Fujifilm digital single lens reflex camera. So I had a number of different lenses to use with this. The next shot though that you see is a telephoto lens. And what that's done is it's taken that background and it has compressed it into the image. So the island is closer. The bike is obviously a little closer to us too. And then that Z-axis that we're looking at is all a little bit more compressed there. And it tells a different story than the other one did, okay? This one's a little bit more intimate and yet still has the same feel in featuring the motorcycle, what it is that I'm trying to do. I use different focal lengths on my iPhone almost everywhere I shoot because I want to see if that perspective gives us a different feel for the story, for that peak experience that I'm having, and for the story that I'm trying to tell. This was out near Zion Canyon at a dispersed camping area that I found that I would often frequent on my motorcycle, and I just love the way it looks out there. But using some compression gives it a little bit more depth and drama and beauty to the shot, to the experience. This is Mesa Arch in Canyonlands National Park, and lots of people go through and take this frame as well. It's just as popular perhaps as the shot off of the bridge in Zion Canyon, because it frames things up out there. And if you go out there right at sunrise, you're going to get this kind of glow that's happening on the underside of the arch. And while I really like that, I decided to use a different focal length and just go about 3 times tighter. And what it did is it got me more into the story that was out through the arch itself. I'm still using the arch to go through and frame it up. It gives me a little bit more interest to the rock formations that are happening beyond that. Stories in art and in photography have this relationship that's happening between what you're seeing as a subject and then what's happening with the background. Out at Death Valley, there's all kinds of figure ground relationship types of things out there to go through and shoot and tell the story of what's happening out at this incredibly wonderfully understated national park. I love Death Valley. Figure ground relationships also come in handy in macro photography. Okay, we're getting really close up and using a very shallow depth of field. The ground goes into a bokeh or bokeh. I don't know how you say it, so I'm going to put it both ways that way. And that amplifies the texture and the lines of anything that you might have happening in foreground. Here I'm using figure ground relationships at an overlook. This is almost a goosenecks. In fact, I have a shot here of goosenecks as well, but I have somebody involved in that shot. And the reason why they are there is to give us some kind of scale as to what the depth is doing, so what the ground is doing. So I have a figure, gives a scale. I have the ground that goes through and tells the rest of the story. And of course, what she's doing and taking the image of that completes the story with what's happening. I hope this gives you some inspiration to take your camera, your iPhone, your whatever the best camera is the camera you have. I used to shoot Fujifilm products with a host of lenses and a number of bodies. I used to shoot Nikon professionally. But the convenience and the variability that I have with my iPhone more than makes up for anything that I could use in a digital single lens reflex camera. Do I miss it? Yeah, I do. But I don't miss lugging all that gear around to go through and get the shots that I need. I've had plenty of experience doing that. I've been shooting for 40 years. I've worked as a photojournalist. I've worked in documentary film production. I've worked in feature film production. And then I've taught photojournalism and commercial photography for a long time. And I never get tired of it because it's my way to go through and capture the peak experiences that I'm going through as a human being. And I hope this helps you maybe do the same. Okay? Thanks for watching.